Alexei Volkov hadn't genuinely smiled in almost 5 years. Those who worked closely within his organization understood this unspoken reality clearly, adjusting their own behavior carefully around his consistently serious, guarded demeanor. Even during moments of significant business success, Alexei's expression remained carefully controlled, distant and unreadable. Each evening following his usual demanding schedule, Alexei visited the same quiet, unassuming restaurant, Bella Notte, tucked away in a peaceful corner of the city. It was one of the few places he allowed himself a small measure of relaxation, appreciating the restaurant's calm atmosphere and consistently excellent food. One particular evening, as Alexei settled into his usual private corner booth, he noticed a new face among the restaurant's staff, a young woman with warm, expressive eyes, moving gracefully yet efficiently between tables. Greeting customers with genuine warmth and friendliness, he paid little attention initially, accustomed to ignoring the routine comings and goings of restaurant staff. However, as the evening progressed, he found himself unexpectedly drawn toward the sound of soft, gentle humming drifting quietly from the kitchen area. Curious despite himself, he glanced toward the sound, noticing the new waitress quietly singing to herself as she worked, her voice soft yet remarkably clear and soothing. Alexei found himself unexpectedly captivated, the gentle melody carrying subtle echoes of something achingly familiar. Though he couldn't immediately place why, he watched quietly as the young woman continued her tasks, seemingly unaware of the attention she had unknowingly captured. As she approached his table to refill his water glass, she smiled warmly, her humming pausing momentarily. "Good evening, sir," she said cheerfully. "I'm Clara. Is there anything else I can get for you tonight?" Alexei studied her carefully, momentarily forgetting his usual guarded reserve. "No, thank you," he replied simply, though his voice carried an unfamiliar softness even to his own ears. Clara smiled again, genuine warmth evident clearly in her expression, before continuing her work efficiently. Unaware of the unusual effect her simple presence had already begun having on the notoriously guarded man seated quietly in the corner booth. Throughout the remainder of the evening, Alexei found himself unable to fully return his attention to the business documents he had brought along, his gaze repeatedly drifting toward Clara as she moved gracefully between tables, occasionally humming softly to herself when she believed no one was paying particular attention. At one point, as she cleared a nearby table, Clara began quietly singing a few gentle lines under her breath, a soft, melancholic tune that carried genuine warmth and emotion despite its simplicity. Alexei felt something shift unexpectedly within him, memories he had carefully suppressed for years threatening gently to resurface. The soft, familiar melody reminded him unmistakably of his younger sister Anya, who had once filled their family home with music and laughter before tragedy had taken her from him far too soon. Alexei hadn't allowed himself to think deeply about Anya in years, deliberately avoiding memories that brought overwhelming grief and guilt. Yet here, in this quiet, unassuming restaurant, Clara's gentle humming had unexpectedly broken through his carefully constructed emotional walls, stirring memories and feelings he had long suppressed. Alexei watched her carefully, surprised by the sudden, unexpected warmth spreading gently through his chest, a feeling he hadn't experienced genuinely in years. Without fully realizing it, Alexei felt his lips curve upward slightly, a small, genuine smile forming unexpectedly on his usually guarded, controlled expression. He blinked, momentarily startled by this unfamiliar sensation, quickly reaching up instinctively to touch his own face, as though confirming the reality of what he was experiencing. Marco, his trusted associate seated discreetly nearby, noticed immediately the unusual shift in his boss's expression, surprise evident clearly in his own reaction. "Boss," he said carefully, curiosity evident in his tone, "is everything all right?" Alexei quickly composed himself, though genuine confusion lingered within him regarding the unexpected emotional response Clara's simple, innocent singing had triggered. "Everything's fine," he replied simply, though his gaze drifted once more toward Clara, who continued her tasks unaware of the profound effect she had unknowingly had upon him. As the evening drew to a close, Alexei found himself lingering longer than usual, reluctant to leave the unexpected warmth and comfort he had experienced simply by being near Clara's genuine, gentle presence. Rising finally to leave, he approached the counter where Clara stood, hesitating briefly before speaking. "You're singing," he said quietly, his voice carrying unfamiliar vulnerability. "It's beautiful." Clara looked up, genuine surprise and warmth evident clearly in her expression. "Thank you," she replied sincerely, smiling gently. "I didn't realize anyone was listening." Alexei studied her closely, uncertain exactly how to articulate the profound impact her simple melody had unexpectedly had upon him. "I hope to hear more," he said softly, before turning quietly to leave, leaving Clara curious and intrigued by the unexpected warmth in his tone. As Alexei walked quietly toward his car, Marco studied him carefully, clearly puzzled by his boss's unusual behavior. "That's the first time I've seen you smile in years, boss," he said cautiously. Alexei remained silent for a long moment, genuine confusion and curiosity evident clearly in his own thoughts. He hadn't expected such simple, genuine warmth to affect him so profoundly, unaware yet of how significantly this unexpected connection would soon begin, transforming his carefully guarded, emotionally distant life. In the days following his unexpected visit to Bella Notte, Alexei found himself thinking often about Clara's gentle singing and the unfamiliar warmth it had stirred within him. Unable to fully explain his own curiosity, he began visiting the restaurant more frequently, sometimes even adjusting his demanding schedule specifically to ensure he could stop by during her shifts. Clara, meanwhile, remained unaware of Alexei's true identity, knowing him simply as a quiet, reserved regular customer who always sat in the same corner booth, ordering the same simple meal each visit. She found herself gradually looking forward to his visits, appreciating his polite, understated presence amid her otherwise busy shifts. "You're back again," she said warmly one evening, greeting him with a genuine smile as he settled into his usual booth. "I'm starting to think you might actually like our cooking." Alexei allowed a small, genuine smile to form, something that continued to feel unfamiliar, yet increasingly comfortable. "The food is excellent," he replied simply, though his gaze lingered slightly longer than necessary on her warm, friendly expression. Clara laughed softly, genuine warmth evident clearly in her tone. "I'll let the chef know," she said cheerfully, before moving on to attend to her other tables. Over the following weeks, their brief interactions gradually deepened into more meaningful conversations. Alexei found himself opening up slightly, sharing simple observations about his day, careful always to avoid specific details about his true profession, while Clara shared cheerful anecdotes about her own life, her love for music, and her dreams of one day performing more seriously. "I used to sing constantly as a kid," Clara admitted one evening, refilling his water glass casually. "My mum always said I had a gift, though I never took it seriously enough to pursue it professionally." Alexei studied her carefully, genuine curiosity evident in his expression. "Why not?" he asked simply. Clara shrugged slightly, though a hint of quiet longing flickered briefly across her face. "Life got complicated," she admitted honestly. "Responsibilities, bills, practical concerns. Music became more of a comfort than a career." Alexei nodded thoughtfully, understanding more deeply than she probably realized. "Sometimes what brings comfort matters more than practicality," he said quietly. His own words carrying unexpected depth and sincerity. Clara studied him curiously, surprised by the genuine thoughtfulness behind his simple statement. "That's a surprisingly deep thought," she said, smiling warmly. "You don't talk much, but when you do, it seems to really mean something." Alexei felt himself relax slightly under her genuine warmth, an unfamiliar yet welcome sensation after years of guarded reservation. I suppose I don't often find reasons to say much, he admitted honestly. But you seem to bring that out somehow. Clara blushed softly, genuine warmth evident clearly in her expression. Well, I'm glad, she said sincerely. I like our little conversations. As their friendship deepened steadily, Alexei found himself increasingly drawn toward Clara's genuine warmth, her music and her simple, uncomplicated joy in life. Qualities he had rarely encountered within his own guarded, complicated world. Marco, noticing the gradual change in his boss's demeanor, mentioned it carefully one afternoon. You've been different lately, boss, Marco observed cautiously. Happier somehow. Alexei considered Marco's words seriously before responding honestly. Clara has that effect, he admitted quietly. She reminds me of things I'd nearly forgotten. Marco studied him curiously, sensing there was more beneath his boss's simple explanation. Does she know who you really are? He asked carefully. Alexei's expression grew slightly more serious. Not yet, he admitted honestly. I haven't found the right moment to share that part of my life with her. Marco nodded understandingly, though concern remained evident in his tone. You should be careful, boss, he advised gently. The longer you wait, the more complicated it might become. Alexei considered Marco's caution seriously, understanding clearly the wisdom behind his concern. You're right, he agreed quietly. I'll tell her soon when the time feels right. That evening, as Alexei once again visited Bella Notte, he found himself listening intently as Clara hummed softly while working nearby, the same gentle warmth and comfort washing over him as it had during their very first encounter. He watched her carefully, admiration and genuine affection steadily deepening within him. As Clara approached to refill his glass once more, she noticed his thoughtful expression. You look deep in thought tonight, she observed gently. Alexei studied her closely, sincerity evident clearly in his gaze. I've been thinking about how much your singing means to me, he admitted honestly. It reminds me of someone very important, someone I lost a long time ago. Clara's expression softened with genuine empathy. I'm sorry, she said sincerely. Would you like to talk about it? Alexei hesitated, clearly torn between his instinct toward guarded privacy and his growing trust in Clara's genuine warmth. Perhaps someday soon, he said quietly, though uncertainty and vulnerability were evident clearly in his tone. Clara nodded gently, respecting his hesitation. Whenever you're ready, she said warmly. I'll be here, as their conversation concluded that evening. Neither Alexei nor Clara realized clearly just how significantly their growing friendship would soon deepen further, drawing them both steadily toward confronting the painful past that had shaped Alexei's guarded, emotionally distant life for so many years. 5 years earlier, Alexei's life had looked considerably different. Though already deeply involved in his family's organization, he had maintained a genuine, warm relationship with his younger sister, Anya, who had always brought light and laughter into their otherwise complicated, dangerous world. Anya had possessed a genuine gift for music, her voice carrying a natural warmth and clarity that captivated everyone who heard her sing. She had dreamed of pursuing music seriously, often performing quietly at small local gatherings. Her passion for singing, bringing joy not only to herself, but to everyone fortunate enough to witness her genuine talent. Alexei had always been fiercely protective of Anya, understanding clearly the dangers inherent within their family's world, yet determined to shield her as much as possible from its harsher realities. He had encouraged her musical dreams, quietly supporting her ambitions despite the complications their family's business inevitably brought into their lives. One evening, tensions between their family's organization and a dangerous rival group had escalated unexpectedly, following a business dispute that Alexei had believed carefully managed and resolved. Unbeknownst to him, however, the rival family had planned a retaliatory strike, intending to send a clear, violent message regarding ongoing territorial disputes. Anya, unaware of the escalating danger, had been attending a small, private performance that evening, unknowingly in a location connected indirectly to their family's business interests. The rival family's attack, meant initially as a warning against Alexei's organization, tragically extended toward the venue where Anya innocently performed, resulting in devastating, unexpected violence that claimed her life instantly. Alexei had been notified immediately, rushing desperately to the scene, though tragically too late to save his beloved sister. The overwhelming grief and guilt that followed had profoundly and permanently altered him. Convinced deeply that his own involvement in their family's dangerous world had directly caused Anya's tragic, senseless death. In the aftermath, Alexei had retreated emotionally, gradually closing himself off from genuine warmth, joy, and connection, believing firmly that allowing himself happiness again would somehow dishonor Anya's memory or invite further tragedy into his life. He had thrown himself entirely into managing and expanding his family's organization, using constant business demands as a distraction from the painful grief and guilt he refused to fully confront. Over the years, those closest to him had grown accustomed to his guarded, emotionally distant demeanor, understanding clearly the painful loss behind his carefully constructed emotional walls, yet unable to fully help him move beyond the guilt and grief that continued silently consuming him. Now, sitting quietly at Bellanota, listening intently as Clara hummed softly nearby, Alexei found himself confronting emotions and memories he had carefully avoided for years. Clara's genuine warmth and gentle singing had unexpectedly broken through the emotional barriers he had maintained so carefully since Anya's tragic death. One quiet evening, after Clara's shift had ended, Alexei finally found the courage to share more openly about his sister's tragic story. Sitting together quietly in a secluded corner of the restaurant, he took a deep, steadying breath before speaking. "I lost my younger sister 5 years ago," he began softly, vulnerability evident clearly in his voice. "She loved singing, much like you. Her voice used to fill our home with warmth and joy." Clara listened intently, genuine empathy evident clearly in her expression. "What happened to her?" she asked gently, sensing the depth of pain behind his careful words. Alexei hesitated, clearly struggling with the painful memory. "She was caught in violence connected to my own business dealings," he admitted honestly, guilt evident clearly in his tone. "I've blamed myself every day since, believing I failed to protect her properly." Clara reached out gently, placing a comforting hand on his arm. "I'm so sorry, Alexei," she said sincerely. "That's an incredibly painful loss to carry alone." Alexei studied her closely, genuine gratitude and vulnerability evident clearly in his gaze. "Your singing brought back memories of her," he admitted softly. "It's been difficult, yet strangely comforting, being reminded of the joy she once brought into my life." Clara smiled gently, warmth and understanding evident clearly in her expression. "Perhaps she'd want you to find joy again," she suggested softly, "rather than carrying guilt that isn't truly yours to bear." Alexei considered her words carefully, something shifting gently within him at her genuine, compassionate insight. "Perhaps," he admitted quietly, though uncertainty and lingering guilt remained evident clearly in his expression. As their conversation deepened further that evening, neither Alexei nor Clara realized clearly that the very rival family responsible for Anya's tragic death had recently resumed activity nearby, their renewed presence soon threatening to once again disrupt the fragile healing and connection Alexei had only just begun experiencing through his growing friendship with Clara. In the days following his heartfelt conversation with Clara, Alexei found himself reflecting deeply on her gentle words about honoring Anya's memory, rather than carrying guilt indefinitely. Though the weight of his grief remained heavy, something had shifted subtly within him. A small but genuine willingness to consider the possibility of healing. He continued visiting Bellanota regularly, his conversations with Clara growing steadily more open and personal. She never pushed him to share more than he was ready for, Instead, offering patient, gentle support that allowed him to open up naturally, at his own pace. "I've been thinking about what you said," Alexei admitted one evening, as they sat together after her shift had ended. "About Anya wanting me to find joy again, rather than carrying guilt." Clara studied him carefully, warmth and genuine care evident clearly in her expression. "And what have you concluded?" she asked gently. Alexei considered his response thoughtfully. "I think part of me is afraid," he admitted honestly. "Afraid that if I allow myself happiness, I'll somehow be forgetting her or dishonoring what happened." Clara reached out gently, placing a comforting hand over his. "Grief and happiness aren't mutually exclusive," she said softly. "You can honor her memory while still allowing yourself to live fully. I don't think she'd want you trapped in guilt forever." Alexei studied her closely, genuine gratitude evident clearly in his gaze. "You have a way of understanding things clearly, things I've struggled with for years," he said sincerely. Clara smiled warmly, gentle affection evident clearly in her expression. "Sometimes an outside perspective helps," she said kindly. "I'm glad I could offer some clarity, even a little." Their bond continued deepening through these honest, meaningful conversations. Alexei gradually allowing himself small moments of genuine happiness and connection he hadn't experienced in years. He found himself increasingly drawn toward Clara, not simply for the comfort her presence and music provided, but for her genuine warmth, wisdom, and understanding. One evening, as they walked together after her shift, enjoying the cool evening air, Alexei finally worked up the courage to share more directly about his true identity and profession. "Clara," he began carefully, "there's something important I need to tell you about who I really am." Clara studied him curiously, sensing the seriousness in his tone. "All right," she said gently, encouraging him to continue. Alexei took a deep breath before explaining honestly, though carefully, about his position within his family's organization, the complicated and sometimes dangerous nature of his business dealings, and the world he navigated daily beyond the quiet comfort of Bella Notte. Clara listened carefully, processing this significant revelation thoughtfully. "That explains quite a bit," she admitted honestly, though clear concern was evident in her expression. "I appreciate you being honest with me, Alexei. I understand if this changes things," Alexei said quietly, genuine vulnerability evident clearly in his tone. "I wanted you to know the truth, regardless of how it might affect our friendship." Clara considered his words carefully before responding sincerely. "It doesn't change how I feel about who you are as a person," she said gently. "Though I'll admit it does add certain complications and concerns." Alexei nodded understandingly, appreciating her honest, thoughtful response. "I'll do everything possible to protect you, should our connection create any complications," he reassured her firmly. Meanwhile, unbeknownst to either of them, the rival family responsible for Anya's tragic death years earlier, led now by a calculating leader named Dmitry Kozlov, had recently resumed activity within the city, quietly seeking to re-establish territorial influence that had diminished significantly since their earlier conflict with Alexei's organization. Word eventually reached Dmitry regarding Alexei's growing personal connection to a young woman named Clara, information he recognized immediately as a potential opportunity to strike again at his long-standing rival, exploiting Alexei's rare vulnerability. "If Volkov has finally allowed himself a personal weakness," Dmitry said coldly during a private meeting with his associates, "then that weakness becomes our advantage." His men exchanged uneasy glances, aware clearly of the seriousness behind Dmitry's calculated tone. "How do you intend to proceed?" one associate asked cautiously. "Carefully," Dmitry replied firmly. "We gather information first, understand exactly how significant this connection truly is, before deciding our next move." As Dmitry's calculated plans began quietly forming against them, neither Alexei nor Clara yet realized clearly just how soon their newfound happiness and connection would be tested once again. threatening to reopen the painful wounds of Alexei's tragic past. Dmitry Kozlov had spent weeks carefully gathering information about Clara, learning her routines, her daily schedule at Belanota, and the increasing significance of her connection to Alexei Volkov. Confident finally that the timing was right, he set his calculated plan into motion, determined to strike directly at his long-standing rival's newfound vulnerability. One evening, as Clara finished her shift and began walking home along her usual route, she failed to notice the unfamiliar car following quietly behind her. As she turned down a quiet street near her apartment, two men quickly emerged, forcing her into a waiting vehicle before she could react or call for help. Panic gripped Clara instantly as the car sped away, her mind racing anxiously as she tried to process what was happening. "Please," she said, fear trembling clearly in her voice, "what do you want from me?" One of the men, calm and clearly experienced, studied her coldly. "You're simply a message for someone else," he replied flatly. "Nothing personal." When Clara failed to respond to Alexei's usual evening message, concern quickly grew within him. After several failed attempts to reach her, he contacted Marco urgently, tension evident clearly in his voice. "Clara's not answering," Alexei said firmly. "Something's wrong." Marco quickly mobilized their resources. And within a short time, disturbing news arrived, a message from Dmitry Kozlov himself, taunting Alexei about his newfound weakness and demanding a private meeting to discuss terms for Clara's safe return. Alexei's fury ignited instantly upon reading Dmitry's message. "He's using her to get to me," he said coldly, anger evident clearly beneath his controlled exterior. "This ends now." Marco studied him carefully, concern evident in his tone. "Boss, we need to proceed carefully," he warned. "Dmitry's been waiting years for an opportunity like this." Alexei nodded firmly, determination hardening within him despite the emotional turmoil he felt at Clara's abduction. "I won't allow him to hurt her the way his family hurt Anya," he said resolutely. "Gather every resource we have. We're getting her back immediately." Meanwhile, held captive within an isolated location, Clara sat anxiously, trying desperately to remain calm despite her overwhelming fear. Dmitry eventually entered the room, his expression calm, yet coldly calculating, as he studied her carefully. "Ms. Bennett," he said smoothly, deliberately using an incorrect name to unsettle her further. "I apologize for the inconvenience, but your connection to Alexei Volkov has made you quite valuable to me." Clara studied him carefully, fear evident clearly beneath her forced composure. "What do you want from him?" she asked, voice trembling slightly. "Simply acknowledgement," Dmitry replied coldly. "That even someone as guarded as Alexei Volkov has weaknesses that can be exploited. Your safety depends entirely on how he chooses to respond." Clara's fear intensified rapidly, though she forced herself to remain outwardly composed, drawing quiet strength from the growing trust and connection she had built with Alexei. Meanwhile, Alexei worked tirelessly alongside Marco, carefully tracking Dmitry's movements and pinpointing his exact location. After hours of careful investigation, they finally identified the isolated warehouse where Clara was being held. "We move immediately," Alexei instructed firmly, his expression resolute despite the painful memories this situation stirred within him. "I won't lose someone else to this family's violence." Their forces moved swiftly and carefully under cover of night, surrounding Dmitry's warehouse discreetly before launching a coordinated, decisive rescue operation. Brief, intense gunfire erupted as Alexei's men quickly overwhelmed Dmitry's guards. Moving swiftly toward the room where Clara was held captive, Alexei personally rushed toward her, relief flooding through him instantly upon finding her frightened but unharmed. "Clara," he said urgently, quickly freeing her from her restraints. "Are you hurt?" Clara shook her head, tears of relief streaming down her face. "I'm okay," she whispered shakily. "You came. I couldn't lose you too," Alexei admitted, his voice breaking slightly with raw emotion as he gently pulled her into a protective embrace. Years of carefully guarded feeling finally breaking through completely. As they moved quickly towards safety, Dmitri, recognizing his defeat, attempted a desperate escape, only to be swiftly intercepted and captured by Alexei's men. His dangerous scheme against Alexei and Clara finally coming to its complete and decisive end. Breathing heavily, adrenaline slowly fading, Clara turned toward Alexei, gratitude and relief evident clearly in her tearful expression. "Thank you," she whispered softly. "For finding me." Alexei held her closely, raw emotion and relief evident clearly in his own expression. "I finally understand," he said softly, "that protecting the people I love doesn't mean closing myself off from happiness. It means fighting for both." As they finally returned safely from the warehouse, both Alexei and Clara understood clearly that this dangerous ordeal had helped Alexei confront years of buried guilt and grief, setting the stage for genuine healing and a future built on love rather than fear. In the days following Clara's rescue, Alexei worked quickly to ensure Dmitri Kozlov's defeat became permanent and complete. With Dmitri captured and clear evidence of his reckless, unprovoked attack against an innocent civilian, Alexei carefully arranged for this evidence to reach the right channels, ensuring Dmitri's remaining allies would have no choice but to distance themselves entirely. Facing certain collapse without any remaining support, Dmitri's organization crumbled swiftly, his years of patient plotting against Alexei ending in complete and total failure. With the immediate danger fully resolved, Alexei finally allowed himself the space to process everything he had confronted during Clara's frightening ordeal. Sitting together quietly in Bella Notte one peaceful evening, the restaurant closed and empty around them, Alexei took Clara's hand gently, sincerity evident clearly in his expression. "These past weeks, and especially these last few days, have shown me something important," he began softly. Clara studied him carefully, warmth and curiosity evident clearly in her gaze. "What have you realized?" she asked gently. "That protecting Anya's memory doesn't mean punishing myself indefinitely," Alexei said honestly. "It means living fully, allowing myself genuine happiness, and cherishing the people who bring light into my life, just as she once did." Clara felt tears of happiness forming gently in her eyes. "I'm so glad you found that peace," she said sincerely. "Anya would be proud of the strength you've shown. Especially these past few days." Alexei smiled genuinely, warmth spreading through him in a way that had become increasingly familiar since Clara had entered his life. "I couldn't have found this peace without you," he admitted honestly. "Your warmth, your music, your patience. You've helped me heal in ways I didn't think were possible." Clara squeezed his hand gently, genuine affection evident clearly in her expression. "I'm grateful to have been part of that healing," she said softly, "and grateful for everything you've shown me in return." Alexei studied her closely, sincerity and determination clear in his gaze. "Clara," he said softly, "I'd like you to be part of my life, fully and completely, moving forward, not simply as a comfort during difficult times, but as someone I genuinely love and want to build a future alongside." Clara felt overwhelmed with genuine happiness, tears finally breaking free as she embraced him warmly. "I'd like that more than anything," she whispered softly. In the months that followed, Alexei and Clara built a genuine, meaningful relationship together, one grounded firmly in mutual respect, patience, and shared healing. Clara continued singing regularly at Bella Notte, her gentle melodies now bringing genuine joy rather than painful memories. A comforting reminder of Anya's spirit living on through the happiness Alexei had finally allowed himself to embrace. Alexei, in turn, found himself smiling more frequently, genuine warmth gradually replacing the guarded, emotionally distant demeanor that had defined him for years. Marco and the rest of his organization noticed the profound change clearly, genuine happiness evident among those who cared for him, relieved to see their boss finally finding peace and joy after years of quiet, private suffering. One quiet evening, Sitting together on a peaceful balcony overlooking the city, Clara began softly singing the same gentle melody that had first captured Alexei's attention months earlier. Alexei listened quietly, genuine warmth and peace evident clearly in his expression, no longer haunted by painful memories, but comforted instead by the genuine joy and healing Clara's music continued to bring into his life, reflecting quietly on the remarkable journey that had brought him back from years of guarded grief toward genuine happiness and love. Alexei considered deeply how something as simple as a gentle song had ultimately guided him toward healing he had once believed impossible. What had begun as an unexpected moment of unfamiliar warmth in a quiet corner booth had transformed completely into something Alexei had never imagined possible again: genuine happiness, healing and love, discovered unexpectedly through the simple, powerful gift of music and human connection.